If a shop quoted you around $1,000 to replace the radiator in your Jeep, don't do it. I'm going to show you how you can replace it yourself in your own garage. Today we're going to be replacing the radiator in this 2012 Jeep Wrangler with a 3.6. So to replace it, I went ahead and ordered a factory radiator from Mopar, and it just came in. So I'm going to go ahead and show you guys what the factory radiator looks like. It comes with a factory radiator cap here, and I'm going to also show you where it fails almost every time. So if you notice, both of these sides are plastic, and we know what happens to plastic when it gets hot. Well, after about 10 years, mine failed, which lasted a long time for this, but it failed right here on the side. This is where it normally fails. It comes apart or cracks right here at the seams, and then it has to be replaced. Along with the radiator, I went ahead and ordered new hoses, and not because I had to, but just because peace of mind. I didn't want to have to worry about the old hoses failing while I'm out on the interstate. Also, they came with clamps too from the factory, so that was nice. Alright, so let's go over some tools that you're going to want to have on hand for this. So you're definitely going to want to have a ratchet. This one, I can swivel it back and forth. This is going to help me to get into some areas that might be a little tight or I can't get a regular ratchet into. Another thing that you're going to want to have on hand is some extensions. Longer extensions and shorter extensions, just in case you need them. Another really helpful tool to have in your box is a little swivel. This goes right onto your ratchet. And just in case you need to get into an area that you can't quite reach, this thing sometimes will save the day. You'll be happy to have it. Every bolt and nut on this thing is going to be about an 8 or 10 millimeter that we're going to touch today. So you're going to want to have 8 and 10 millimeter already pulled from your box and set aside just for this project. Everything 8 and a 10 millimeter. Next, you're going to want to have a clip removal tool. Now, if you don't have one, a regular flathead screwdriver will work just the same. I've got this just to use because I tend to be a bull in a china shop sometimes, and I get in here and I pop these clips out and break them, so these are handy to have. Also, if you're like me and you tend to be a bull in a china shop, I went ahead and bought some extra clips just to have on standby, just in case I break any, so these are going to be helpful. You're going to be fine. You have all those tools. Obviously, it goes without saying, you want your vehicle to be completely cool before you start working on the radiator. So you don't want to have just driven this thing off the road, parked it, and then got out and started working on it. Let your engine cool down. Everything should be nice and cool before you even attempt to work on this. You're going to want to grab this engine coolant overflow, and you want to slide it right out. So this has a canister with a line attached to it. So what I do is I just take this and pop it off because I'm going to use this. So then you take your canister and you want to set it to the side. Then you want to remove that overflow hose right here. So now you have a good hose, and I'll show you what I do with this. Then you take your radiator cap and you want to go ahead and loosen that off. Okay, next up you're going to take that overflow line that I told you about, and you're going to want to take and go underneath the Jeep. Okay, so I've got you guys right under the bottom of the radiator. So this is the passenger side of the vehicle. If you'll notice right here, if I move this little line, you'll see a little valve. And this little valve has a little, if you can look at the bottom, that little spout on it right here where my finger's touching, that spout, that's where I'm going to take that hose that I took off of that overflow, and I'm going to put that hose right on it. Alright, so I got that right on it. Alright, so I have this hose. Next thing I'm going to want to do is I'm going to want to pull that bucket over here. And I'm going to take that into that, and I'm going to put it right down in the bucket. And you want it to sit way down in there, so that way it can pour and fill that bucket up. Once you get that on, the next thing you're going to want to do is get in here and turn that valve. Alright, so once you've turned that valve, we're going to sit here and let it finish draining, and then we're going to move on. While that radiator's draining, we're going to go ahead and remove the engine cover. All right, next we're going to take and loosen our clamp that's connected to the throttle body with an 8 millimeter wrench. So we're going to get that loosened up a little bit. Okay, now that that's loose, we should be able to slide it right off. Then next, we have two 10 millimeter bolts here. So we want to go ahead and get that loosened up. So next, we're going to go over here and remove the 4 clips that are on our air filter housing. So we have 2 right here in the front, and then there's going to be 1 here on this side, and another is going to be right down here on this side. You can go ahead and remove this hose. We're just going to pull it back gently right off. Okay, then we can take this air filter and move it back here. Now there is going to be a sensor right here, so you want to just push that tab in just slightly and remove it. We don't want to break that tab. Okay, then set that to the side. Take a look at our filter, and then this we can go ahead and kind of give it a lift out of here and get it out of our way. So now once that's out of the way, we're going to go ahead and use our tool to remove these 4 clips that you see here. You're just going to slide that under. Next, using our trim tool, we're just going to lift the 6 of these clips that are out in the front. All right, so now that the clips are removed, we're going to go ahead, and this came out really easy, but you want to be very careful because there's some lamps down here on each corner of this, and they have a wiring harness on it. So give it a little tug. There we go. And so you see these wiring harnesses, give it a little unscrew there, and we're going to set that to the side. And up here, unscrew that and set it to the side. So next, while I have access, I want to remove these clips from these hoses. Again, these hoses were probably okay, but I didn't want to take a chance. I don't know, I can't remember if I ever replaced them or if they're as old as the Radiator was. All right, then you're just going to move these hoses to the side. Now we've moved down to the front of the vehicle. So we're going to have 2 10mm bolts here that we want to remove. We want to leave these lines in place. Then on this side, we're going to have 2 8mm bolts. And then one right up here. All right, so now we're just going to move this out of the way just a little bit. We don't want to put too much pressure on these lines, but we just want to expose our AC condenser and get to the 4 bolts that are here. So there's going to be 2 8mm bolts on this side and 2 on that side. So with this out of the way, we can now remove 4 8mm bolts that are holding our condenser on. So usually there's one right here. As you can see, it's missing. So that tells me that when this was in at the shop last time, the mechanic didn't put the screw back in. So that screw's missing, but that's okay. We have 3 others. I checked. They're on. So I'm going to get to those with an 8mm wrench. That'll just make it a little bit easier to get down in there. And I got that one on the bottom, so I'm going to get under here and unloosen that. All right, so to get to this bolt, I've had to go underneath. All right, and 2 8mm bolts on this end. And then one underneath. All right, so with this out of the way, we can now remove 4 8mm bolts that are holding our condenser on. Usually there's one right here. As you can see, it's missing. So that tells me that when this was at the shop last time, the mechanic didn't put the screw back in. So that screw's missing, but that's okay. We have 3 others. I checked. They're on. So I'm going to get to those with an 8mm wrench. That'll just make it a little bit easier to get down in there. And I got that one on the bottom, so I'm going to get under here and unloosen that. All right, so to get to this bolt, I've had to go underneath. All right, and 2 8mm bolts on this end, and then one underneath. All right, next up, we're going to remove the 2 bolts on both top sides of the radiator. These are going to be 10mm bolts, so we're just going to go ahead and take those off. That one. This time we're moving to the driver's side of the vehicle, and we're going to remove the top 10mm bolt from the radiator. All right, now we're going to come back to the passenger side of the vehicle, and where our power steering reservoir is, we're going to remove this 10mm bolt. All right, so we'll go ahead and get that removed so we can get this loose. All right, I'm just going to move this just over to the side a little bit. All right, with that power steering reservoir moved out of the way just a bit, it's going to give us a little room so that we could get in here and get this wiring harness that's going to be attached to the side of this radiator off. So we want to just be careful and use our trim tool, just kind of break that free. So now it's free from the radiator. Next up, there's going to be an 8mm bolt that's going to be right on the driver's side of the vehicle. So we're back on the driver's side of the vehicle, And down here where you can see my ratchet, my 8mm ratchet, it is right on top of that bolt. It's hard to really get in there and see, but this is the best shot I can really get for you. You're going to want to remove that. If you have a lot of trouble getting in there, if you don't have a small enough ratchet that can get down there, you can remove this horn right here, and that'll give you a little better access between the area. It looks like I'm just going to be able to sit here and back and forth get this off this way. So once you remove that, we'll go to the next step. Next, we're going to remove this wiring harness from our electrical fan. So you're going to push that tab in and just give it a little pull. All right, that looks nice. Next is going to be a pair of 8mm bolts. So we're going to go ahead and take these. So with the pair of electric coolant fan bolts removed, we can go ahead and remove our electric coolant fan. Now with the electric fan removed and out of the way, we should be able to get the radiator out now. Just be careful, we don't want to mess anything up when we remove it. All right, and she's out. All right, so since we went ahead and took the time to remove the radiator and replace it, I thought it best to go in and replace this thermostat as well. So we have good access to it right now. So what I'm gonna do is go ahead and remove these. They're two 10mm bolts, and we'll take this out and replace it with the new one. The new one was about $31, so I felt it was worth replacing. Just to show you guys, probably not a bad idea that we went ahead and did this. If you can see the gaskets, this is how it looked right when I pulled it out. So I know I'm making a mess with this antifreeze, but yeah, the gasket was all coming apart, and so good thing we decided to replace this. So let's go ahead and replace it. We're gonna replace it with a Duralast thermostat. Now, I'm not wild about this brand. It's just the one that happened to be in stock. It actually was the same thermostat that I just removed. That Mopar thermostat, the factory thermostat, has been on back order for a long time. So this is the only one I could get my hands on at the moment. So we're just going to go with it. Now we're going to take these 10mm bolts and put them back in. And also, you always want to inspect these. I did a quick inspection already and made sure that my rings are nice and seated. And as you can see, we have a nice fresh ring that's not all messed up like our last one. All right, now you want to be careful not to over tighten them because they are plastic. All right, guys, so while you have the space to do it and the radiator's out, you want to get in here and take a look at everything and inspect your belts, your hoses, make sure everything looks good, and you can tidy up and clean things up in the space. All right, just to point out, while I was doing my inspections, my flex tubing was just crumbling. So I had some extra in the garage, so I went ahead and replaced it where I needed it. So you might want to take a look at that. It just helps protect those wires from all the heat from your radiator and everything. Keeps those wires from getting brittle and breaking. All right, next up, we're going to put our hoses back on. Bottom one first. So that's in place. And notice those factory green clamps. All you have to do to get those, you just take and compress these clamps and pull that green tab off, and they go right in place. And now for the top hose. And that's seated all the way right here at this little ledge. All right, guys, we're ready to install the radiator. We're just going to be mindful of that condenser. Next up, we have that really fun area, probably the hardest part of getting the bolt on out of this whole project. It's on the driver's side, just getting that lined up and the hole started. So I got my fingers in here, but okay, I think we've got a ratchet on it. Okay, she's on. All right, next up, it's time to screw in 4 8mm bolts that we have to screw in our condenser. All right, and then 2 more 8mm bolts on this side of the condenser. Next up, remember we had our 2 10mm bolts and then that one single 8mm. Want to get that in place and get it started, and then we'll snug it down. And then we have our 1 8mm bolt, and we just get that in. All right, next up, we're gonna go ahead and put those 2 10mm bolts that we took out of the radiator back in. So we're just gonna push this radiator back into place and get that started. And we can go ahead and tighten it down, but not all the way. We'll just get it just before we get it real tight, and then we'll get the other one on before we snug it on down. All right, let's go to that other side and get that one started. All right, so now we're on the driver's side, and we'll go ahead and get this bolt in and get it started. And we'll give the other one a few turns. Next, we're going to take our wiring harness on the side here, and we're just going to clip it in to the side of the radiator. Then we're going to put our power steering reservoir, set it back, and mount it. All right, now for a bird's eye view looking down on the radiator, I wanted to just show you guys the little hooks that are right here on both sides of the radiator. This one's a little harder to see, but it's right there. And that's where our electric fan is going to set down on top just before we get it mounted. All right, next guys, we're going to set our electric fan right down on top of those hooks. We should have a couple mounts on the side that they fit snugly in, and they should just set right down on top of them. Okay, and if you have it sitting just like it should, you'll be able to have it lined up perfect for you to put those two 8mm bolts back in. So we're going to go ahead and get those started. All right, now don't forget to connect your wiring harness. All right, next we're going to connect our hose, bottom first, and we're going to seat it all the way till it butts up against the front right here. All right, now I'm going to just compress the clamp. That way I can remove the little green clip. Now give it a little tug and see. It's nice and secure. And now we're going to connect the top hose. Okay, it's butt up against that. Okay, let's give it a little tug. All right, it's good and secure. So next we're going to install our air filter housing. Get that into position, seated down on the grommets. All right, next we're going to connect our electrical connector. And then, all right, and then you're going to slide this housing down. Make sure we connect our hose. And then get it snugged up on our throttle body. Don't forget our clamps. Now that those are snug, we're going to want to make sure that our throttle body is snugged right up against it. This is an 8mm. All right, so with this snugged right up against our throttle body, we can go ahead and tighten down our clamp. It's nice and snug. All right, and next up, we're going to install our coolant reservoir in for that overflow. Next, we're going to place our cover back on. All right, next we're going to install these lights back into our grill. And then once you have your lights installed, then you're just going to line these clips up to the holes. Make sure that they get all in the right pegs, and then you want to see that it mounts right up to the front here, and then just give it a good bump. Okay, and once you have that secure, you're just going to put it in place, line up those holes, and then we're going to put our push pins that we took out earlier back in. Remember, there were 6 of them. One there. Okay. Now your grill's back. All right. Now we're ready for the engine cover. So there's 2 pins in the back. Let's cover that there. There we go. All right, so we're going to go ahead and pour our antifreeze in. Now, the Jeep holds about 2.8 gallons of coolant. So I have 2 gallons of antifreeze concentrate and then 2 gallons of distilled water. So that way, you know, I can mix it myself and it'll go a lot longer than normal. So, all right, so let's go ahead and pour in our antifreeze. All right, so I got 1.5 gallons in it. So I'm going to start it up and let it run. And then I'm going to let a little bit of those air pockets get worked out. The thermostat open up, and then I'm going to add some more. All right, guys, so she's been running for about 30 minutes now, and we've been adding some coolant as she's been running. The fan just kicked on, so she's staying nice and cool. One thing you want to do is check and make sure that there are no leaks underneath it. So you want to get down and just make sure that there's no drips, no leaks. Everything is nice and tight. You want to be able to shine a light down in and see that the hoses there's no drips around your hoses. So you just want to check and make sure that everything's nice and dry. All right, guys, so in a minute, I'll take it for a ride around the block and just make sure that she stays nice and cool. But I'll take you guys inside the cab and we'll show you the thermostat. All right, guys, we are inside the cab and this is what the temperature is. After about 35 minutes, we are maintaining. So I'm really happy to see that. Like I said, I'm going to take it for a ride around the block just to make sure that we've got all those air pockets out, and then I'll bring it back. But yeah, and you're reading this right, 206,000 miles on it. So she's got a lot of miles, and it's the same engine. Hopefully she has many more on her. I think that's a wrap for now, guys. So we'll see you back next time. Thank you.